The mind can ramble off in strange ways.
You're in for a real treat.
Introducing Punchlines
Podcast.
Your next comic has been on the Jay Leno Show, David Letterman. Please welcome the very funny Mitch Fatel.
Punchlines
Podcast.
Oh, that guy's fucking hilarious.
Whatever the mind can conceive and believe, the mind can achieve.
Punchlines. We have my old friend and one of the more talented individuals in the country.
Thank you.
Jim Norton on the show. And I just wanted to say this off the bat. First of all, it's Cory Sanhagen, my partner. Off the bat, I wanted to say I'm not even close to as successful as you are right now, and I get asked to do 5,000 podcasts, which I lie about everyone and say I'm not available, and I totally expected you to tell me you weren't available. So I want you to know it means a lot to me because I know you must get asked. Hundreds of kids want to do them in their basement.
You get a lot of offers, yeah. But I love you. I mean, I know you for 20 years. I'm happy to do anything with you.
Well, that's why. And I was like, and you make me look really cool in front of Cory because I was like, I got Jim Norton. So I think Cory was about to move on. And right, this one. So
no, I'm so happy to see you, Mitch. I'm really happy you're well.
Well, it means a lot to me. And so I wanted to ask you a couple questions. And speaking of the fame, the newfound fame that you had, it's kind of newfound, right? It's been the last 5 years. You kind of exploded. Is that correct?
No, it's funny. It's like in the time I'm doing worse now than I was doing. Like for me, the best times were like 2007 and 8, like when Opie and Anthony were doing the Traveling Virus tour and all that stuff. And then that all got fractured when the show Anthony got fired in 2014, and Opie and I split like 2.5 years ago.
Right.
So it's going okay now, but I'm kind of dealing with some fans I still have, and some hate my guts, and some have just gotten older. So it's good now, but it was actually better then.
It was better then.
Yeah. The draw was better. I do well now. Like I'm very happy to be where I am.
You're in pretty good shape.
Yeah, it's decent, but it was better then.
Really?
Wait, why would that be? Is that because of the state of comedy or what?
No, I think that what happens is you have to always have new people be interested in you. So like the same people you got to keep doing new things so new people can discover you. But the same fans after a while will either A, get sick of you, B, they start finding new people. Like you look at Burr going through the roof.
Yeah.
Not only is he a great comic, but he has F is for Family and he's such a good actor. Like he has all these other interesting things that let new people discover him. And then when they watch him, he's hilarious. So you got to do new stuff.
And so did you personally and I want to answer this question for myself as well. When we started out, did you ever expect to have fame like that? Did you ever see yourself becoming that big where people wanted to meet you and want your autograph and stuff like that? Did you have plans for that or when we started out?
It's all I ever thought of. Like, I'm like, that's how I'll know I'm famous. I'm like, that was a goal. I'm like, I'll be famous. I'll sign an autograph or I'll take a picture. I think I said sign an autograph in New York and then sign one in Seattle. Like, that's how you know you've made it.
Yeah.
And then I wound up doing that. On the way to Seattle gigs, I would sign one in it, and I realized, no, that's not the goal. Like, it doesn't mean anything.
Isn't that crazy? You worked your whole life for that. Cory, do you remember the first time you got recognized? Did it freak you out?
Yeah, it was actually by a guy in Whole Foods when I was walking by after my first ESPN fight, and he was like, "Oh, good fight last night," and I was like, "Oh, that was cool."
Yeah.
But that only lasts like a week for me. You know? That doesn't last very long. But yeah, it's cool.
I remember I don't remember the first time I got recognized. I remember my first compliment because I needed them so bad because we started as open micers and we're eating shit so often. And it was at Rascals in New Jersey. And I was walking to the bathroom and a really hot girl walked by and was like, "You're really funny." And I remember thinking like, this is business for me.
Yep.
This is what I'm going to do the rest of my life.
That's exactly it. The first time a girl recognizes you or gives you a sexual energy because you did a show there's no, I still remember the first time it happened to me. I didn't even hook up with her and she was awful looking, but it was the idea. She really was. I was with a couple of Jim Florentine, Bob Levy, and I'll never forget, she was homely and she was rubbing my leg under the table.
Wow.
And I don't know if I've ever been more turned on by anything. I was the opening act.
Right.
But she had brothers at the table. And so I'm like, hey, why don't I go out and sign a headshot for you? I just wanted to try to like fuck her in the car. But we go outside and her brothers followed us out and watched from the door. So I had to act like I was looking for a headshot, which I knew I didn't have. So we traded numbers on a napkin or something and never went anywhere. But that I still remember her rubbing my leg And I couldn't believe it was happening.
Can't believe that suddenly you're getting it. Because I always said, because we're usually the misfits, and for us, and I think it's a little different for fighters, because fighters tend to be more studly throughout school. They're the ones who could beat up people. But at least for me as a comedian, I know that like I always tell people that getting successful was becoming the pretty girl in high school. Suddenly I would get attention from people that never gave me attention, that would never even, and my fame story was I had just done a couple Tonight Show. Do you remember I was dating a really hot, tall girl?
Yeah, that picture's still in the Comedy Cellar.
Yeah,
yes.
There's a picture of me in this. She was a stripper who walked into the Comedy Cellar, and she walked over and she's like, "I'm a really big fan of yours." And I said, I was like shocked that a girl was even talking to me.
Yeah, she had a big, juicy hiney. She was really lovely.
Very, very special girl. And and she came back to my room that night. My little hovel in New York. I lived in a little $300 hovel, and we started making out. And she let me take off her clothes, but she kept her panties and her bra on. And then I tried to take off her panties, and I'll never forget these words. She said, "Nope, you just get panties tonight," meaning that I could just see it. And I said, "Oh, really?" And then I said, "Oh, you know what?" And this is true. I said, "I just did the Tonight Show. Did you see it?" And she said, "No, I want to see it." This is all planned. And I put it on, and we were having sex 5 minutes after that.
Wow.
And I realized, like, this fame thing is really cool. It's when all the chlamydia happened after that I was like, it comes with kind of a price.
Yeah, it's part of it. That's the neck injury in the gym. It's chlamydia.
Yeah, when I started going, okay, it comes with a little bit of a price.
Yeah, it does, but it's worth it. But fighters are interesting to me because, I've talked to so many fighters, and I wish I could do that. Like, if I
that's
could
why
do
I'm
that,
here right
I would
now.
never have told a joke in my life. Because that gets you, being funny is like how you try to get some kind of respect or how you try to keep the animals away. It's like a weird defense thing. So when you can fight, that's how you...
Were you bullied when you were a kid?
A little bit. I mean, but the thing that kept them from pummeling me was that I was funny.
Yeah.
And nobody wanted to be humiliated. Like social humiliation was what everyone is scared of in high school.
Yeah, worse than an ass whooping.
It's worse than an ass whooping. And it's not, a fight is not even the punch that scares people. It's the embarrassment of people seeing you beaten.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
Jocks knew I could make fun of them, and the guys who smoked dope knew I could make fun of them. So I kind of like was friends with everybody and funny and a weirdo. But no, I didn't get beat up that badly in school for that reason.
I didn't get. There were a couple of kids that would threaten me, and then I was funny enough. The way it worked for me was I was funny enough to get the popular girl and the popular guy in school to just like me.
Yeah.
And high school kids and junior high school kids, and you realize it now looking back, are such sheep that the minute someone popular likes you, you're accepted at that point. And I was kind of like a made man at that point. No one would touch me.
Yeah, once they know that, once you're validated somehow through somebody, it's like in that book, The Game by Neil Strauss, where they talk about negging girls, and it's almost like if other people validate you, your value goes up, and then somebody you likes you. It's a whole. It's the stuff that we never talk about, but it's all these social cues that people pick up on. If an ugly guy is dating a really beautiful woman, other beautiful women will look at that ugly guy like, oh, he's got something.
He's got something
because she likes him.
Yeah, yeah. Did you have any need to get into fighting because you wanted girls to like you, or you were successful with girls? Or?
No, I don't think it was anything that I was striving for.
Yeah, you're way too.
Okay,
he doesn't have many demons, Jim. He just doesn't have. He's just a good guy who just beats the shit out of people.
Were you violent growing up? Did you fight a lot?
I was aggressive, and I had anger stuff going on, but maybe not really bad. But yeah, I was a pretty aggressive kid. I played soccer and basketball, but very aggressive in those two. They're kind of sissy sports, but yeah, pretty aggressive in those two. You know.
Were you? I was
going to say, did you get, because a lot of fighters I know they've had where somebody was bullying them or beating them up, whether it was an older brother or an uncle or someone in the neighborhood, and they just took fighting to be defensive and then became great at it.
Yeah, no, it was never a defensive thing for me. Actually, when you guys were talking, it made me think of I was also a really small kid growing up too. But I always just had really huge friends that I was buddies with. Where I didn't have to be funny, but I just had bigger friends. So my bigger friends would always stick up for me.
It helps.
I don't know. To me, fighting wasn't a defensive thing. It wasn't anything like that. It was just a sport. A sport that I really enjoyed when I started, and That's just how I see fighting.
That's even more scary, that somebody can look at it like a sport, like a guy who's got constant rage or constantly feels defensive, but someone who's like, no, it's just a sport. It's like, that's a guy who's comfortable fighting and not having that craziness behind it. That's even more frightening to me.
Yeah, but don't you think also in our business, and this is what I've learned as I got older in this business, that there's the same type of comics. There's the comics who go on and see it as an art, and then there's the guys that just go on and just get laughs being kind of idiots. We know who they are, and they've gotten sort of successful at that as well. And there's kind of fighters that just go out and brawl, and then there's fighters that see it as a sport and stuff.
Yeah, I guess it all depends. And even some of the guys who are like goofy or whatever as comedians, I mean, they're all artists, but it's some guys go up there. What bothers me about stand-up is when a guy goes up there and is bombing, and he acts like he's just doing it for the art, and it's like, no, you're not good at what you do. Yeah. You're not doing a good job. It's like, that's not art. Right. You know, if you're gonna paint a picture and you're just making a fucking circle with two eyes in it, you're like, it's a face. It's like, no, you're a shit artist.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of guys in our business too who are awful.
Yeah, and actually, as a matter of fact, what I noticed is that there's a lot of people who will blame the audience that things aren't funny and stuff like that, and it's just like, and there's definitely days when the audience just won't like you, but you're either funny or you're not funny.
Yeah,
you know. So
wait, can we go back just a step? You said, okay, so you said that like the first, when that chick was rubbing your leg and like she was giving you attention and you were getting that gratification, and then you found out that wasn't cool. What, did anything change after that? Were you just like, oh shit, like?
Oh, do you mean no? When I found out that I wasn't
that fame wasn't the goal, I guess.
Oh, I was.
That we
that
thought, I
happened
guess,
when
it
I
would
was
solve
signing
everything.
autographs, and that happened for me when I said, if I ever take a picture here and then take a picture in Seattle, then I know I've made it. Like that, when that happened, I thought like, oh, this is not as famous as I thought this was. Like the girl rubbing made me crazy, but I was way newer then. Like I was an MC, I was doing 15 minutes. I didn't have any kind of notoriety then. That was just like, fuck. That drove me into doing, and she looked like Rocky Dennis. Like she was an awful looking girl. She really was. She had a big head.
I think I fucked her.
I tell you, probably did.
I think she went further with me. I was a little more advanced than you.
She was a Jersey. It was a Jersey gay girl, or Connecticut. It was a fucking awful girl. But it was just the idea that somebody gave me some sexual attention. Even maybe she was just flirting.
Dude, I remember just starting to be an open micer. All of a sudden, my sex life just started increasing immediately. Just by the fact I was on stage, it's so intoxicating that I would go to work. I was working at Denny's at night, in the daytime, and then at night I would go to clubs. And all of a sudden, it was a totally different world. The girls, I knew it immediately, and it's really intoxicating. And I think it's almost... it makes you start to doubt yourself. I'm sure you've had an experience like this, and I'm kind of embarrassed of this, but when I was at the top of my kind of game, which was, I guess, about 10 years ago is when I was really big, I met a girl in Appleton, Wisconsin, and and she came right back. And once I was kind of successful, I always said it was like cutting the line. I never had to go out on dates. I never had to buy them dinner. You could bring them right back to your room.
Cutting the line.
Cutting the line. But then I realized there's a price to that. And I'd be interested if that price bothers you at all, because it did start to bother me. She was giving me a blowjob, and she looked up and said, "Mitch Vatel's penis." And I'll just never forget thinking that was an odd thing.
It is an odd thing. It'd be worse if she said it to me.
Or if she said it's Jim Norton's penis.
I know what you mean. You don't always know their motives, and you have to watch out.
I didn't mind their motives. It just was weird because I suddenly started seeing that, like, oh, it's really very little to do with... Like, I thought cutting the... Listen, it was wonderful. I'm not going to say I'm not complaining. I'm just saying that it was a weird feling to be thought of as an entity instead of... Does that make any sense?
Yeah, sure.
Cutting the line, what it does is, like, without going through the normal process, a lot of time it was almost like you look at McCain and Sarah Palin. She wasn't vetted properly.
Yes,
that's what happens. You're almost
right.
not
you're not vetted.
You're not vetting people in your life properly. So all of a sudden, somebody has total access to your life, and you're sexual with them, and you're like, oh, they're crazy.
Yeah.
That's why they were willing just to fuck me. And once in a while, they'll do like because they're a fan and they want to do it, and I'm fine with that. But I think Brando said something about that. The minute I open my mouth, I'm only going to disappoint you.
Yes.
That's the more you get to know me.
That's a great point.
I am only going to disappoint you because you started at the top, and now you're only going to see my flaws and what's wrong and what I'm scared of and what I suck at.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's what I started to, because I started getting very, very hot girlfriends that I never got before, and then eventually I'd always go, now they just saw me at a crappy show.
Yep.
Now they just saw me die. Now they just saw my apartment, all that kind of stuff. And Cory always says to me that one of the things about being in the UFC is people just assume now he's a millionaire because he's in the UFC.
Yeah.
And, you've only been doing it long enough to have, a regular living at this point.
Yeah, I pay all my money to taxes anyways.
Yeah.
You do.
Yeah, most of it.
Yeah, but they do have that if you're a fighter, all of a sudden people think that, oh, this guy
Any
has
kind
so
of
much
fame,
money.
though, right?
Yeah, any type of being on TV or up on a stage or anything, there's just this like assumption that
Flies
you're
private.
doing really well. Yeah, you have all your shit together, and yeah.
How
not
long
the
into
case.
the business did you finally make some money?
At least 10 years. I started in 1990, and I toured with Dice from like 97 to 2000. Might be 2001. I was making $100 a show to open for Dice. Like, there was no money. And
Wow.
it was for the experience.
Yeah.
And it changed my life. So it was like, I was so happy I didn't, and he knew it would, and he was very good to me. Like, I'm very loyal to Andrew.
Do you remember getting the call that you would be his opening
From
act?
him. Yeah, we were friends. We became friends first. Anyone ever had opened for me, I've been friends with first, if they've toured with me. And he and I were friends first. And he goes, you want to go to Texas? I'm going to Texas. It was Dallas and Houston. And I was like, yeah, I would like to. And Kenny called me, told me the money. They flew me down. And Dice paid for everything, 5-star hotel, fucking meals in great restaurant. Like, you know what I mean? So you were living a life that was better than I was living in New York. And I'm so happy I didn't look at money and go and get greedy and act stupid.
Of course not.
I've never been like that in the business. So it took like maybe 11 years before I made anything.
Jim, what a great experience to all of a sudden be, and this is leading into so many questions that I have for you because I've admired you for so long from afar. And my question was, you seem on stage, and I'm going to try to say this in a way that comes out eloquently, to be self-deprecating, but yet you've always been very successful at what you've done. You have to have an amazing confidence in you as well. And so, is the self-deprecation real, or is the confidence real, or is it two different sides of you?
It's the self-deprecation is not only real, but there's less of it on stage than is in reality. The reality is worse. It's not even confidence. It's more like a desperation for attention. And so in order to get that attention, you have to be on stage, which is a confident act. But it's not, no, it's very real. And it's talking about myself in a horrible way. I'm just kind of, I know I'm not stating facts, but I'm stating the way my mind talks to me. So I'm kind of saying these things out loud that I think. And I know they're not rational.
Yeah.
Like, I know I'm not an asshole. I know I shouldn't throw myself up. But my mind says that stuff to me, so I say it out loud. So it's very honest in that way. Where
it is really honest. And I pride myself on being someone, and I told Cory this about you before we came in, I pride myself on being someone who tries to be honest in everything I talk about, even to the point that I had chlamydia, the stuff like that, because I always feel like, first of all, it's all who I really am anyway, and I've always felt that the people who were honest made me feel more comfortable with my honesty. Howard Stern was the first guy to really be honest about who he was and how he felt about himself. But your honesty went way over anything that I'd ever even be comfortable sometimes admitting. And I was wondering, have you always been like that? Is that something that developed? And where did that come from? Because you've inspired me you've admitted things, and I told Cory this, you've admitted things in public forums that most people would probably die not even admitting. And where does that come from?
it made the comedians laugh. When I first started, Bob Levy, Jim Florentine, those guys, I realized when I was on stage and I was being honest that they would laugh. And they were like, that. They thought that was funny.
Yeah.
So I got positive reinforcement that, hey, this is okay to talk about. And then it just felt so good. And I feel like I'm lying if I don't overshare. Like I feel like I'm being a liar if I'm hiding stuff. And it just felt good to get it out. It felt good to get it out. And it almost feels belligerent sometimes to get it out. And it's, it's not, but it just feels that way. Like if I say it, you can't hurt me with it. That was kind of a philosophy too. You're not going to get me with any of it. Like, I mean, what I've talked about, the stuff I've done, it's not surprising to anyone. No one cares, people are only happy when they can shame you with something they can catch you doing.
Right. Yeah.
So I can't, I feel ashamed of certain things, but I'll talk about them.
Do you feel ashamed of certain things?
Oh God, yeah, of course. Yeah, I mean, it's the whole thing is shame. The whole thing is like you're the fucking one of the Peanuts cartoon, the kid that has dirt all over him, Pig Pen. That's shame. It's all over the place. Yeah, it's constantly there.
Yeah,
always.
Awesome. That's a great.
What? So is comedy kind of your way to work through that in your own life, or?
Yeah, and I think most comics do that too. It's the benefit of it. You get it out. You take some of the sting out of it by making it funny, and people like appreciate it, and they relate to it, and they laugh at it, or they disagree with it and they laugh at it, or they find it repulsive and they laugh at it. But when you take it out and you put it on the table and everybody looks at it and laughs about it, and you're still okay, it takes away some of its effect.
Yeah, it's a little therapeutic.
It's very therapeutic, yeah really.
Did you want to be accepted by all the other comedians? Because one of the things that I always remember about you is I was more of the outsider. I remember we had the table in the Comedy Cellar, and all the comedians would sit around and they'd put each other down.
Yeah.
And you were awesome at it. And I always felt really uncomfortable because I get my feelings hurt really easy. And you were so good at it, but you were always really nice to me. And I was always thinking that was really funny because even Rich Voss wasn't nice to me, but you were always nice to me. And so I guess what I'm getting at is who are you behind that? Like, because you're not the guy that just kind of rips on comics. You always were really well liked by everybody.
Thank you.
I don't know of any comics who really have spoken badly about you. And so was that important to you?
It was, but it's energy. It's like a relationship you have with a person. Like you will strangle somebody in the gym who you're sparring with, but then you'll meet another fighter and you guys will just say, hey, what's up, man? How you doing? And you still respect each other the same, but you're not sparring with that guy, so you're interacting with him differently.
Sure.
And that's how it was with, and it's an equal fighter. It's not like guys I didn't tease, I didn't see as equals, but like whatever my relationship was with that person.
Right. You knew I wasn't doing that.
If you weren't doing it, I was okay. I liked you, so it was like fine. It wasn't like, I don't like to make, like I like to hit hard and get hit hard when I'm teasing people, but it has to be a back and forth. It doesn't feel good to just pound on somebody who's not enjoying it. And not that they can't do it back.
That's a great point.
But if they're not enjoying it.
Because that's a bully, right?
And it's a dick move. Like, and it always felt good if it was like Patrice or Keith or Bobby or one of those guys who I knew were Voss. I mean, Voss is brutal. So like to hit a guy who's brutal feels really good.
Yeah.
It's more fun. But a guy who's not brutal with me, if we don't have that interaction, it's like it's just not the way I think to interact with them.
You know how my mind always worked is I always took things so personally, and so funny you brought up Patrice. And the reason why I couldn't get involved with the other comics doing that was I was always the kind of person that thought that whatever the person was saying to me, that was the kind of person that they only to me. I didn't realize Patrice was the kind of guy that put down everybody.
Yeah.
So one day I remember Mike Birbiglia said to Patrice, "I think Mitch is a genius," and Patrice just destroyed him, going like, how could you think Mitch Fatel is a genius? And I remember going like, I'm so hurt right now. And I actually wanted Patrice to go like, yeah, he's kind of a genius, even though Patrice only put everybody down constantly. And I took it so personally. I was not meant for this business.
See, but no, it's not true. Patrice's thing was he was a brilliant guy, and he was brilliant at dissecting people. Like Trump has that ability, like to laser in on something in a person that you can make fun of.
Is it a weakness? Yeah.
Not necessarily a weakness.
Okay.
No, it can just be a quality.
Right.
And a lot of comedians have that, but I'm raising Trump as an example just because he's been so known for picking out like Jeb Bush, low energy, ruined him. Marco, lightweight, ruined like these little things.
Yeah.
Patrice could do that too, really beautifully. And when he would say things, it would hurt people because it sounded like, oh God, this smart guy. It's a statement of fact. But you have to realize that he was as full as shit as any of us. And that's
what I never realized. Yeah.
Yeah, sure he was. We were all the same. Like he's a vulnerable, frightened comic, like everyone. He was just brilliantly funny.
Yeah.
A great mind and loud and seemingly fearless. But I mean, we had conversations towards the end of his life. I remember we were talking one time and he's like, man, I feel irrelevant. Like he felt passed over by the business.
And he's so relevant. He's so, do you know who Patrice O'Neill is? You got to look him up, Cory. Okay. When I finally got older, I was able to step back from the fact that he was mean to me and go, oh my God, he was a brilliant guy. And also understand he did it to every comic. And,
And he started to feel bad about it. He's dead now. He died in 2011.
He had diabetes.
Yeah.
He was insanely overweight and very unhealthy. Probably didn't like himself very much. And
yeah, I think he had the same self-hatred that comedians do. Like in the sense of being a comic, he was confident in his abilities. Like he was confident in the fact that he knew he was funny. He knew he was smart. Like he would follow anybody. He didn't care. But yeah, he had a stroke in 2011. But towards the end of his life, he started to feel bad about certain things. This just comes with aging.
I guess Mark Maron's going through it now. He talks about it on his podcast.
Is he feeling bad?
He says he was a dick to everybody. And Mark Maron was one of those guys that was just mean to me. And I was just thought like because I wasn't talented. And now I'm learning he was mean to everybody. And he's apologizing to everybody who comes on his show. And I'm like, I wish I would have known that when I was a kid. But still, because I took everything to heart so bad.
Well, he probably didn't know it. And what Patrice dealt with was feeling like, man, I just, again, you get a little older and you start to regret the way, and he apologized to a few people. He apologized to Jeff Garland, who I know he wasn't nice to, on Tough Crowd. I remember that. To Lisa Lampanelli, I think he apologized, I think he said he was sorry to her, but he felt really bad about a lot of that stuff. And Maron, I was always nice to me. It's so funny. Mark Maron, I knew people were like, he was a dick to me. I never.
I hate that he was nice to you now. That kills me.
But it was, I don't know why. I met him in the right time. I told you,
everybody kind of liked you. It was you. You were a very interesting. Do you have any enemies in the business that I know of? Or
no, I can't think of.
Because Mark Maron was one of them. He asked me to do his podcast, and I was still mad at him. This was a couple of years ago before it was big, and I turned him down. And now I'm like writing him every week, like I kind of want to do your podcast, and he ignores me now because I never knew podcasts were going to get so huge or whatever. But then when I started listening to his podcast and I started realizing, and I want to ask Cory the same question, like back when we started out, and I don't know if you had this, maybe you didn't, and maybe that's what comics picked up on. I was too jealous of everybody to enjoy and appreciate everybody else's talent. I can look back now and realize how talented you were, how talented Attell was. I can enjoy it. I can watch one of your specials and I can actually enjoy it instead of going like, I should have that special, whatever, because I've just always felt like we're where we're supposed to be, and I'm just kind of enjoying the journey for the first time, and that comes with age.
My jealousy of other comedians it works differently. It works like, fuck, I would love to be doing that, but he's good and I suck. Like when I'm jealous of them, I never begrudge other comedians. Like when I see a guy doing 17,000 seats, I never think like I should be doing that in his place. It's just a confirmation to me that I'm shitty. So it's like my jealousy doesn't work and maybe people could sense it. Like I didn't begrudge anybody their success. Like never thought they didn't deserve it. I was just like, yep, of course I do not deserve it. So it kind of worked in a weird way. But yeah, no, I didn't have a whole lot of where I felt like, because I feel like, hey man, I'm lucky to be doing what I'm doing. I've met every idol I've ever had. Like, it's a fucking fun life.
Yeah, it is.
So do you feel like you're not good at it, or do you feel like you don't deserve it?
Both. I mean, I know on an intellectual level, like as we're talking, like I know I'm a good comedian. Like, I'm doing it for a long time. But I'm talking about on a gut emotional level where things are not rational. Where you're not like, it's funny, Sam Morrill, who's Sam,
I know his
comedian
name
from New York. He told me that a lot of the young comedians thought I didn't like them. I'm like, really? Like guys like him and Mark Norman, Joe List, like I would come in and I don't talk much to those guys because I thought like, I don't want to bother them. They don't want to hear from me. Like it was totally the opposite. I'm like, they want nothing to do with me. So they mistook me as thinking I didn't like them. And I was like, no, I love them. I think they're all funny. So it's weird sometimes how your own feelings about yourself, people think that you feel that way about them.
Wow, that is really interesting.
Yeah, because I love those guys. I think they're all good, but I was like, I have nothing to add. They're not going to want to, what are they going to want to say? I'm just quiet at the table if I don't know the other comic. I forget that other people don't feel welcome because they're new there. I just assume that they're not going to want to say anything to me. What do I have to, you know what I mean? So a lot of times I don't talk.
Yeah.
And then people think you don't like them.
Yeah,
Cory,
sure.
do you get that with younger fighters that want to... Because I saw you yesterday, and it was really interesting. I watched you sparring, and I watched you sparring with a girl who was not known or anything, and she'd come from another gym. It was the first girl you were sparring with. And I thought to myself, that's really interesting because she's sparring with the number 3 UFC bantamweight fighter, and it seemed like there was no ego at all, that you were even sparring with her. I thought that was just really, really cool. And so do fighters have any of that? Like...
Ego as far as what?
As far as, do you have to feel that you're better than every other fighter?
No, for me, not anymore. I know that like when I go into the cage, whatever happens in the gym doesn't really matter. No one gives a shit if you're winning belts in the training room. Everyone just cares about how you're doing in the cage. So. Actually, she's in the UFC too. Her name is Shauna. Yeah, I forget her last name, but yeah, she just started training.
Something like that.
Yeah, that sounds Danger Dobson. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, really? She was in the UFC.
Yeah, yep.
Oh. I turned her down to spar with her. I probably should have because I felt I was better than her.
Did you?
No, I wasn't sparring. Believe me, I was just watching. I was the guy that everybody just kept telling me to move out of their way so they could snot rocket into the garbage right next to me, and I was like, okay, this is different than comedy.
But no, everyone's different. For me, I don't feel like I need to win in the training gym. For me, me to be validated. Actually, I'll handicap myself before I start to like be.
What about if someone's getting the better
much.
of you in a sparring session? Do you then turn it up to prove to them that like
No, that day it's just all right. This guy fucked me up that day. you
Yeah,
know?
yeah.
And maybe it was just, I don't know. Maybe I wasn't focused or whatever it is, you know. Or maybe that guy was just better than me that day. That's fine.
And that's how fighters look at it. They look at it as better that day. Like I've heard fighters go, "Well, he was the better fighter that day."
But even then, man, like the more I've been fighting, and the more I realize is that like the better guy isn't always going to win in a fight.
Absolutely
the better
not.
guy is not always going to win.
The better comedian isn't always killing. It's just, you know, I saw Hedberg die constantly before me, and he was a much better comedian than I was. And
he would bomb a lot. Yeah. Colin bomb, Metallica. All the great comedians will eat their dick. It's a part of it.
I also wanted to get back to just what Jim was saying about the comics putting down each other. I would assume that that's the version of fighters trash talking and stuff. You know, like is that basically a thing that the more a fighter will trash talk, the more they're really not confident of their abilities? Because I always think that has to come from somewhere.
I don't know. Maybe. I'm not a big trash talker, so I don't
know you're
know.
not,
But
has anyone ever talked real trash to you?
Not like excessively, but I don't really give a fuck what they say either. You know, like I don't. It doesn't matter. There's no lion when you're in the cage. So whatever they have to say, I could really care less.
I think it works different. Like it's funny because some guys, you look at like Israel Adesanya, like he talks a lot, but he's really confident. Like it's like Conor, I think, is confident. You know, I think they're all confident on some level, and some guys it's just natural to their like with Colby Covington, it feels like a little put on.
Well, the thing about Colby Covington that bothers me is I wanted to like him so much because first of all, he's such a talented fighter, and then he said something that just really bothered me just as a human being, and it made me dislike him. And then I thought he really does go so far to make people dislike him that is it a show? And what he said was he put down Mike Perry's wife. Yeah. And I just thought that was like, you know, something, if someone got on stage, a comedian said something about, you know, my wife used to be a stripper. And if they went on and said something about her in a derogatory term, like, well, she's giving lap dances or something like that. And he actually said, I don't know if you know what he said, but he said something about Mike Perry's girlfriend looking like a horse.
Yeah, I remember that.
And I was
I
like,
do remember
you
that,
know, man, like at what level do you go? That's just shitty. Like
that's really unprofessional. Yeah,
and just mean spirited. And I don't like to like mean people, and it bothered me because I wanted to like Colby because he's so different.
Yeah, he's a weird dude. Like I think sometimes, like when Conor does it, what I like about Conor is I think he does do it primarily to promote fights. And when he loses, he's graceful when he loses. That made me like Conor a lot was when he lost. He in the interview, he was like, hey, man, he was the better man. He deserved it. He was a good fight. Like, he's very gracious when he loses a fight, which makes me like him. But Colby, I had interviewed him on the Jim and Sam show on Sirius. And when he came in studio, and he was great. We had a good time with him.
Yeah.
And then on UFC Unfiltered, where Matt is my partner, we had Kamaru Usman in studio. This is before he had the belt. And we knew Colby was coming in. Our producer had booked him. And it was when Colby was going to fight Dos Anjos. And Rafael always said does not promote fights. Like, he's like, he's not a good promoter, you know. What do you call him? Dos Nachos or something. He had some weird nickname, but he doesn't promote. But I had talked to Colby a few days before, whatever, about it. And I'm like, do you get distracted by certain things? And he goes, no, not at all. So Kamaru being in studio, he felt like we ambushed him. But it really wasn't. It was like, RDA's not promoting a fight.
Right.
What do you care? Like, he called in. I didn't think it would matter to him at all. And I didn't book Kamaru. But then he's like, oh, fuck Jim Norton. He set me up. And I'm like, I didn't set you up, dude. It's just a guy.
Yeah.
And Kamaru wasn't even that much of a dick to him. He was kind of, you know, knowing he was promoting another fight. He was, you know, but I thought that he's the type of guy that will talk trash and didn't care. It didn't seem to affect him because he said it didn't affect him. So whatever. So he thinks now I'm a dick for that. But it was like,
but the reason why I respect him in a weird sort of way is because as a comedian and Jim, you're and this is so interesting to me about you. You know, I need people to love me so bad that I remember for a long time in my act, I didn't write new material because once I had an hour set, I was so scared of dying, and I'm so mad at myself for not, because all the material I could have written that I didn't write. And I remember Lucian, who was the manager of the comic strip, taking me in his office, and he had passed me, and Lucian said, "What are you doing up there?" And I said, "What do you mean?" And he goes, "You're going up and you're killing." And I was like, "Yeah." And he goes, "Yeah, I know you can kill. Why aren't you going up there trying out new material? These are spots that are very valuable." It was a top New York City club. And I remember him saying, like, I know you can kill. I want to see you go up there and work on new bits. Lucian really cared about the comics, I realized looking back now. And I still couldn't do it. I still felt that every time I went on stage, if I was dying or trying out new jokes, I would never work again. And it's a bad feeling. Whereas when I look at Colby, I'm like, he kind of wants people to hate him. That's a very interesting concept to me.
Yes, but sorry to interrupt you, but his job, success isn't contingent on people liking him. Our job means people have to like us for us to succeed. So it's different because Colby doesn't need people to like him to be a good fighter. But to be a comedian that's successful, people have to think you're funny and they have to like what you're doing. He's not risking anything in the gym. Like, you know what I mean? He's saying things socially, but you going up there and just taking a risk on stage is like you risking something in the gym for him.
Yeah.
Do you understand what I mean? It's different. I know what you're saying, but it's a different risk he's taking. It's not the same as doing new material because he doesn't lose anything if people hate him.
Yeah, but I would be so upset if people hated me like that. And I always bring up this story, and I'm sorry, Cory, if I bring it up too much, but one of the first ways I became acquainted with Cory was watching one of his fights where it was a split decision and the audience was booing. And Cory said, that didn't feel too good. And he said that, and I remember thinking, like, but then when I got to know Cory, I realized, like, I don't even know if you cared that much, but it didn't feel good to you at the time, right? So, I mean...
Well, I don't know that it didn't feel good. It just, like, I didn't want to lose. And, like, I thought that the boos were, like, directed at, the decision.
What do you? They were directed the decision.
You
had won, and then I think it was Anik was interviewing you. I think it was, and they were booing so loud because it was a split decision. I think it was a Lineker fight. Is that correct? And then you said, "Well, I don't know why everybody's booing. That doesn't feel too good. Or that's not cool." And I remember just thinking it was kind of cool that you admitted that. So, but
I didn't really care about like. I don't really know what I did care about. I did care that I wanted to win the fight, and I thought that I was the winner of that fight because I thought that my performance was really good.
Yeah.
And I thought that they were booing the performance, but really it was just that was like their home crowd,
hometown guy.
Yeah, Florida is pretty much Brazil.
Yeah.
As far as fighting goes, so. I mean, that's why I was being booed, and that's why it bothered me, is because I thought that my performance was bad. I didn't think that it was because of anything else.
Have you ever been booed, Jim?
Yeah, because you don't really come off as a guy that like really cares too much about whether or not
people like you.
Yeah, like you're just really honest and really blunt and really yourself.
I want them to like me. Yeah, I mean on stage, sure, but if I'm bombing and I know, like, there's times where I know I'm just bad. I'm having a bad night.
Okay.
I stink. My jokes are off. My timing is weak. I feel small. And then there's other times where I'm like, nah, they're talking and they're being shitty. Like they're not paying attention and they're blaming me because they're not catching the setups. And you can, after a while, the truth. Like, like I know when I suck and I know when they're kind of a shit crowd. But booed, I got booed once when I was working with Dice. We were doing Chicago in it was Mancow was promoting the shows at the it was like 4,000 seats and Dice was doing 2 shows.
4,000 seats, and
massive.
You were getting $100 a set, by the way.
I might have been getting more at that point, yeah, but it was just
you were getting free popcorn too.
Yeah, and Morton's afterwards. But you know what Dice did for me that was so valuable is he took me on the radio with him. He always promoted me. He was so good.
Yeah.
So I went out. Mancow introduced me. I walk out. Before I walk to the microphone, they are booing. They are booing.
Where was this?
In Chicago, Rosemont Theater. And they're, boo. Before they didn't know who I was. This was probably 99, 98. And I get to the mic, and they can't hear me. And my opening joke gets fucking nothing. And I'm like, oh boy. And then a couple of them heckled, and I addressed it. And then one guy heckled me, and they stopped, and I knew they were, and I smashed them, and then I got them. And it was weird in that moment because they stopped to listen to the response to the heckler. And then when they laughed, or a few of them laughed, then a few more of them laughed, and I built it. I didn't kill, but I wound up having a decent set. So that was the only time, but they booed me before I said anything. I've had a lot of terrible sets where I've completely bombed, but I don't think I've ever been booed off.
Yeah. I've always been so scared that I've always been able to get an audience usually, but I'm not proud of myself for it because, as you know, I started out doing a character that I always say the character, because everybody was always like, who is that? And I was like, well, that character is the 14-year-old Mitch who just wanted to be loved in school. And I remember there was a point because people always ask me, who's your character? The character was, there was a point when I was between probably 10 and 13 years old where I was the really cute kid in school, and I used to say cute things, and the girls liked me and stuff. And then I started to reach adolescence where all of a sudden you had to be tough.
Yeah.
And I couldn't be tough, and I tried so hard to be, but I was 5'4", I was small, I hated fighting. So when I started doing comedy, I channeled back to the kind of cute kid that everybody liked, and that kind of became my character. What I realized was that character was insanely powerful with certain audiences. But then, as the nature of the beast, I would go on certain shows where like there would be a dice crowd or something or someone, and then I would go on and I would do my material, but I wouldn't do the character. And people used to go like, man, you could get any room, you could do your, and I remember always feeling ashamed because I had seen guys like Mitch Hedberg and Dave Attell or whatever who would go up and do exactly what they did and never change who they were, even though they would die for, you know, and even you, I never saw you change too much who you were. You were always the same person on stage. That's why I was asking about the confidence question.
Yeah, you know, I mean, I'm kind of the same in any gig. I mean, I can't, if I'm going to do well, I'm going to do well. If I'm not, I'm not.
Yeah,
but,
that's what I meant when I said what I
I'm
said.
sorry.
Yeah.
No, I can't change who I am. I mean, I don't know what I would change too. Like, I'm not good at being charming. Like, you know, if people like me, you know, when you're funny, they think you're charming. But I'm not good at charming an audience.
Yeah.
Whatever it is I do, it just seems to work, and I don't know if I could switch it.
I respect now so much the balls that you had. I used to think that I had balls, but now I realize I didn't. And I remember distinctly because I was the Comedy Cellar, and this has stuck with me for maybe 30 years now, so I should tell you. Because I remember thinking, how can someone talk about that on stage? And now I look back and it was incredibly honest, and the bit was Monster Rain.
Oh, yeah.
And I remember you doing it, and I kind of wanted you to tell Cory what the bit is. And I remember thinking, like, I would never be able to admit, nothing like that did happen to me. I don't know if it's a real story or not, but I remember thinking to myself, like, I'd be so ashamed of that and I remember thinking, like, well, I'm not really honest at all. Like,
I was ashamed of it, but it was one of those things. I named HBO special Monster Rain. It was just a game I would play when I was a kid. My friends and I would blow each other when I was a kid, and there was a bunch of us, and we would play Monster Rain, where it was the weird, like, as kids, you know what you're doing is dirty and wrong. But
How old were you?
7, 8.
Okay. Can you show me instead of just telling me the story? Let's go.
You're the right height. One of us would yell Monster Rain, and it would give us the excuse to hide under this porch. And once we were under the porch, we would blow each other under the porch. That was kind of what became this game we played. So I wrote a bit about it, and I told people about it. And it's funny, that's in Edison, New Jersey. I drove by there last week because whenever I do the Stress Factory in New Brunswick, I drive through my old neighborhood because so much weird sexual stuff happened that I always drive by and I still see that porch. And I'm like, what the fuck happened there? Like, I know there's stuff I can't remember that happened. Like, I see my old apartment. I have a memory of that porch and getting caught. My one friend caught me blowing my other friend in the hallway right above that porch. Like, that was such a weird area for me as a kid.
Yeah. And
I left there in Halloween of 4th grade. Like, so anything I talk about from those days was before October of 4th grade.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think people admire that type of vulnerability, though, because I think that's
now I do,
you know, like, maybe that's what makes you such a great comedian, is because people want to be that they want to be that vulnerable, and they want to tell their deepest, darkest secrets. And when they see someone on stage do it in front of a lot of people, it makes them feel very empowered. You know, it's probably almost the same with fighting, where, like, they want us in interviews to give the boldest statements and say that we're going to knock so and so out, because it makes us extremely vulnerable in that fight. And I think that people just love that shit. They just love watching people be bold and be really vulnerable, because maybe it's something that they can't do themselves.
You also don't want to, like, whenever I talk about stuff like that I find is personal or would be embarrassing or exposing, I never ask their permission. Like, when I tell it, it's never like in a way like, I hope this is okay with you guys.
Yeah.
It's, I give it to them in a way where it's like, I don't care if you approve of this or not.
Yeah.
This is my life, and this is, I mean, try to make it funny. I mean, I don't just stand there and tell them fucking horrible fucking childhood stories. I try to be funny with it. But it's like, I think that also it takes away, like when you were talking about doing a character in front of certain crowds, where they would see that as being, and they would pounce on you instead of seeing that as being cute. They would be like, fuck you, and they would get you.
Right.
I think if I delivered certain material in a way where I was like, if I ever delivered it where I was wanting their permission or needing them to be okay with it, they'd pounce on me. But because I've always kind of spit it at them, what are they going to do with it? Not like it? So what? Don't like it. It is what it is.
Yeah, you get what you get.
Yeah, and it's not to be a dick. I've just found that was the way I was comfortable saying it.
But so the most embarrassing thing, and my whole life was very scared of admitting embarrassing things I did. And I remember I told my wife this once because I was like, wow, this is just embarrassing. I don't know if I could talk about it on stage, and that's why I give you so much props for it. There was a period in my life where I became a peeping Tom, where I would go around and look in people, and I would go out, and because I was so fascinated with the idea of watching people have sex.
Sure.
I had a really messed up childhood, and for some reason, maybe the vulnerability. And I remember once seeing it. I remember once I hopped over a fence and I looked in a hotel room and I saw two people doing it. And first of all, it didn't look anything like the porno, which was shocking to me. It was just some fat guy with his socks on, and it just was not sexy at all. It wasn't what I expected. But I did it, and I remember a cop one day pulling up and going, what are you doing in there or whatever? And I just I got out of it somehow. And I remember thinking to myself, I'm going to die and never tell anyone because I'm so embarrassed that this was me. And then so this is why I wanted to give you props. When you started doing the Monster Rain story on stage, I remember going like, okay, well, I'm not that. Like, I didn't blow anyone when I was 7. I don't know why I'm so scared about admitting it. I even told my wife that, and she's like, oh, I guess you wanted to see people have sex. It was amazing how much I owned the shame of the thing. I've been shameful my whole life of things, whereas you, and on that subject, did you have a moment where you were writing that bit and going like, I can't talk about this on stage? This is a very, very sensitive, because that is a very sensitive topic that most people would never admit.
That particular story, because I had talked about other stuff on stage long before then, but that particular story, I was in the Montreal Comedy Festival, it was 2003, and Jeff Singer had a show called Confessing It. So you had to tell embarrassing stories or stories that were private that you had never told on stage.
Yeah.
So the stories I went on and told were, like, I had told stories about picking up prostitutes before that, like where a girl, it was a true story where a girl was giving me a blowjob and I didn't know that trans girls were hookers. And I was rubbing her back. And I remember the words that was like, well, this is a big back for a girl. And that was the words that thought came to my head.
It was Dominic Reyes.
Yeah, it was. She hit harder. And her back was huge. And I remember I knew this is male. This is not a woman.
Yeah.
I knew.
Yeah.
And I got turned off by it. And I'd always liked trans girls, but I don't know why. It just wasn't what I wanted in that moment.
Yeah.
So I told that story. And I told another story about fucking a trans girl, but I lied. And I said, I didn't really know she was trans, but I did. And I fucked her anyway. I fucked her without a condom.
But that's interesting. So you changed the story for your own personal...
For confessing it. Yeah. I was too embarrassed. I wasn't ready to admit that
you do get embarrassed.
Did that in my adult life. I admitted the story.
Yeah.
But I was like, I wasn't ready to say, like, yeah, I knew she was trans when I fucked her.
Yeah.
I knew. I found out at the end. I admitted that I found out at the end, but I knew before. And then the Monster Inn story I told.
Yeah,
and then Opie, credit to Opie, because he said, because he was there that day, he goes, when we come back on the air, because we've been kicked off the radio for 2 years, he goes, I'm going to remind you of that. So he brought that up on the radio when we came back, and I began to just keep talking about it on stage and developed a bit.
Yeah.
So I credit him for actually bringing that
And
back.
how did audiences how did they react? Because I remember in the cellar, this was what was amazing to me. You always had your people that liked you. You were shocking. And then you knew that a lot of those bits weren't going to kill. I remember hearing lots of gasps in and again, like I tell Cory, I wish I could go back now and just appreciate what you were doing more than being like, oh, okay, I'm better than him. I'm funnier than him because I get more like I was just so obsessed with that, and I hate myself for that now.
Yeah, that's all right.
But because I couldn't have just appreciated the talent of what you were trying to do at that point, and also understand how advanced you were, that you were trying to, I guess, do something. Was there a point in your life where you're like, I'm ready now, because I think as open micers we start out going, okay, I just want to be funny. But then you start to take now I want to say something, I want to do something, and I want to stick out and be different. Did you start to slowly develop into, okay, this is how I want to talk on stage now and be real?
Yes, this is what I want to talk about. Like, I want to be funny, but I want it to be funny with things that I want to be funny with.
Right.
And again, it doesn't mean that I think I'm doing a higher form of art. Like, I want people to laugh. Like, to me, that's what makes a comedian is like we talk about social issues,
Right.
we talk about things, and people laugh. At least attempting to be funny. You know, somebody standing up there just preaching. It's like, fuck you. It's boring. Like, I don't need that. That's what that's what your uncle does. That's what differentiates us as people are paying to laugh and hear what you have to say. So if you can be socially honest or whatever you feel is honest, that's great. But don't make that the priority. The message shouldn't be before being funny because you're a comedian. That's what our job is. So yeah, I did start wanting to talk about things I want to talk about, like the sexual stuff or, whatever it is that bothered me or, people being attacked for speech, like after I got
that's
fired.
so cool, man. So you remember consciously starting to develop into, because what were you doing at first?
It was high energy stuff.
Yeah, we all were at first.
Yeah,
Me too.
Just like me. Like I watched stuff from 1993 and I literally want to put a bullet in my head.
Yeah.
But again, it took that to kind of get me, and I watched stuff and then I could see myself changing over time and becoming less and less needing them to agree. I always wanted them to enjoy the show, but I don't need them to agree with my point anymore.
That's cool, Jim.
I don't need them to, like if I talk about Trump, I talk about him the way I want to talk about, but I don't just go up there and bash him. Not because I think you shouldn't bash Trump, but it's just like everyone.
And you don't lecture either. That's a big part of what comics are forgetting.
You can't lecture.
It's the worst.
What? So has that have those changes kind of affected like your audience and stuff like that, or?
I honestly don't know. I mean, it might have because I wouldn't know it because they won't actually reach out and say it. But now it's like if you say anything, who are the politicians? Doesn't matter. If you say something that's not negative about them, people who hate them will hate you for not trashing them. If you say something that's positive, people that hate them will. There's no way to win.
Yeah.
Because everything is instant. All the reactions are instant on social media and Facebook and Twitter. So you can't worry about them approving. You can't worry about them agreeing. You have to just worry about the jokes being good and being honest. Like no one will ever pin me down and go, why did you say that? Because I'll always be able to tell you why I said it.
Yeah.
Even if it's wrong.
Yeah.
Louis said that to me one time. That was a really nice compliment. Years ago at the Cellar, he was there when I was doing a set, and he goes, "You're really good at explaining why you think the way you think."
Yeah.
And I always remembered that.
The Louis compliment meant so much. I got one from Louis too, and it stuck with me. And I hate that I never even admitted how much that meant to me because he was so good. Louis C.K. is just he's
such a good comedian,
so talented that it's almost stupid to me. And he gave me a compliment once, and it meant a lot to me. It got me past the fact that Patrice hated me.
It feels good, right?
It does feel good.
When another comic that you respect says something to you that especially you hadn't thought of. It wasn't like I was trying to do that.
Yeah.
I always like to. The conscious thing I like to do is I like to close people's exits. Like I know if I do a certain joke, they're going to be offended. Like I know it. So what you do is you set it up by talking about how awful it is when people get offended or how weak it is to get offended. And the crowd signs up for that. They're like, yeah, fuck that. All right, that exit's closed.
It's a science.
Boom, boom, boom.
Yeah.
And then, like I'm doing something now where I'm doing a bit on Ted Bundy. It's a long bit on a documentary and how the people react differently to documentaries than comedy. So now anything I do after that, if they groan, it's like, well, you were okay.
Yeah.
With and then they laugh, realizing, oh, okay, yeah, we did sign up for that. But part of it is just getting them to not be able to back out on you.
I'm sorry.
Wow, that's so artistic.
It is. It's just repetition.
But it's
honestly.
like I said, it's like we're landing a plane. We're always going through connect A to B, connect B to C to get there. And I wonder if any fighters have ever said that, because you just said something really interesting, which is at the end of the day, we still have to be getting laughs. That has to be. And Cory and a couple other fighters have admitted to me something that I didn't know, and I wonder if you've heard it, that they hear the boos when they're fighting, that they'll hear a boo if it's a boring fight or, and that didn't you say that they'll actually be inside you that goes, oh, I have to start punching more or something?
Yeah, in my last fight against the Sun Cell, I think I heard, we were against the cage and I heard one person boo, and I was like in my head, I reacted off of that one stupid person's boo in the crowd, where I was like, why am I changing what I'm doing based off of some asshole?
Especially if you got knocked out
row,
and that guy's going home with his beer and doesn't even care. But and I've done that. I've given audience members way too much.
Oh my God, a lot of power that they don't. Referees will be influenced by boos. Or sometimes guys are doing that and they're trying to advance a position, and then the ref will come over and break them up. And it's like, what the fuck are you doing?
I play that to my advantage, actually. If anyone just has me in a position where I'm having issues getting out, I'll but they're not doing anything, I'll look at the ref and kind of go like this, and then the ref will actually react and be like, because you got to remember that the ref that's pretty high position of power for the ref too. So the ref is thinking, oh, don't fuck this up either. The ref, because the refs can, their jobs can be over like that too.
Cory, You just taught me something. So the refs are actually because are the refs also aware, and this is what's also interesting about what you do. Fighting is not fighting, it's a show. A fight is two people in the street fighting. You guys are putting on a show, and it's got to ultimately be entertaining. So is the ref have that in his mind as well, that like, well, if I don't keep this fight entertaining, I'm not going to be like, I'm
sure that they do feel that, yeah. And the only reason I know that being a ref is really stressful is because I've reffed at even like really, really small promotional like smokers that we talked about before that are just unsanctioned fights that really don't fucking matter at all. I was nervous to ref this fight with these two people who haven't even had a fight before, and I was like, oh, I can really play this to my advantage when I'm in the cage and like really get the ref going.
And you also know that you have the ability to make a mistake that really hurts a fighter too. Like either you let it go. Who is the Mario Yamasaki? I think his name was.
Yep.
Who he let. I forget her name. She was getting pounded on by Valentina Shevchenko, and she was a Cachoeira. Was that Cachoeira? She was getting pounded on badly.
Yeah.
And Mario's like, hey, I have to let a fighter die on their shield or some expression. And Dana's like, you got to fucking protect the fighters.
Yeah.
And he let her get pounded on way too long. And then you get a guy like Herb Dean, who was
Ben Askren, and is that the fight you're talking about?
No,
with the choke?
No. This is with when Uriah Faber was fighting. And it wasn't a Sun Sao, it was Henan Barao.
Okay.
And Uriah was like on the bottom, but he had his thumb up, and Herb didn't see it. And so he stopped the fight.
I remember
and
that
Uriah
fight.
Faber was fine. He's like, what the fuck you do? Herb just didn't see it.
Yeah.
So he cost Uriah a huge fight by just not seeing. So either way, you can get somebody hurt or wreck something that they've trained for 9 months by making. So there's a lot of pressure on those guys.
Yeah. And it's also interesting. Me and Jim were talking about the vulnerability, and I think fighters have a different vulnerability. And Jim, I'm also interested, before we go on, why fighting or watching fights appeal to you, because I know why it appeals to me. And why it appeals to me is because I see people who are seemingly the toughest, mothers. I don't want to say fuck because I have a son now, so I'm watching my language. They're the toughest guys on the block, and they're getting knocked out in spectacular fashion, and then they're going up and doing it again in front of millions of people. And I don't even know what that kind of vulnerability would be like. And I always go to, there's a fighter who's also a model. What do you remember? You know who I'm talking about?
Yes, Luke Rockhold.
Yeah.
No, not
Very
Luke
handsome
Rockhold.
guy.
Not Luke Rockhold. There's a guy who runs the fashion walk.
Sage
Stipe Miocic?
No, Ronda Rousey. No, God, what's his name? I'm going to have to insert it here.
I don't know. Rockhold was the only one I thought
really
of.
handsome guy. But anyway,
if he's really handsome, it's probably Rockhold.
It's not
I saw
Rockhold.
him
He
once
was
in
with Demi
my
Lovato. He
life.
was dating her at one point.
No, he's got like really structured face. He's very, very handsome. I would do Monster Man with him.
It might be Luke.
Yeah, I'm not attracted to Luke, but
you know who he is. Okay.
No, I know who Luke is. Okay. Yeah, but anyway, so the guy was. He's so good looking he could just be a model, and he got
Wonder Boy?
knocked out. Not Wonder Boy.
Sage Northcutt?
No, Sage isn't really that good looking.
He's at one now, isn't he? Didn't he
nice.
leave? Didn't he go over to
he's
one?
at
year?
one. Yeah.
He left finally.
Yeah, they never knew his contract.
He was just hated for some reason and I think it's because people thought he was a kid that cut the line. But I didn't.
He was an
what
entertaining
people
fighter. He was very
thought,
polite,
I
nice
liked
kid. I mean,
watching
we
him,
interviewed him. He was really a sweet guy, a gentleman,
I liked
not at
him.
all arrogant. He was a really nice dude.
Yeah.
But the guy I'm talking about, he got a head kick and he did the chicken dance. And I just thought, and I remember thinking, and you even said this to me one day about one of your fights, Cory. Those fights are out there forever. Once you've been knocked out spectacularly and you're now on someone else's highlight reel, your face is going to be. And I always thought to myself, that's a vulnerability that you can never escape for the rest of your life. And that to me is balls now. That to me is more balls than going out and knocking someone out.
Yeah.
And I respect that. And I don't think I could do it.
I like the fighters so much because every fighter I've interviewed, I've never had a dick. I'm sure some of the guys are dicks, but I've always had good experiences with them.
Yeah.
Because guys who fight for a living and are good at it, you don't have anything to prove. I don't like interviewing guys in the NBA. I don't like fucking baseball players that are too cool for the room. And Joe Rogan pointed something out where he said fighters and comedians, the thing they have in common is that fighters are constantly being humbled in the gym. And comedians are constantly having jokes, Bob. Like you are put back in your place constantly. Like no matter how good a fighter you are, there's somebody tapping you in the gym. There's somebody, there's better position. Like, so you're constantly being reset. Rogan explained it really well, but it made sense to me. And I think that's why I like fighters so much, is because they don't have anything to prove. So they don't come in with arrogance, and they're always nice to the fans. Always nice to the fucking fans. A lot of that comes, I think, shit rolls downhill, and Dana's always nice to the fans. I've never seen him say
Colby.
no for a
That's
photo.
another one of those things that he's done so differently than everybody. He called everybody in Brazil animals and stuff.
He did.
Which I remember thinking, like, that's when I started to like him, just because I thought that was just him going so far to the other end of being the wrestling guy. It's the only time I started to really dislike him was when he started talking about people's families.
Chael Sonnen did that, though. Chael did that in Brazil. Like, you think he stepped on the flag? I think he actually apologized for that. But he did some stuff when him and Anderson were fighting that was really uncalled for, saying he wanted Anderson's wife to cook for him, and he drove Anderson fucking crazy. Anderson cried after he won that second fight.
Really?
Like, he was so relieved because he had such a high mental state, but he broke down and was crying after he beat him the second time.
Yeah.
He wanted to win so fucking bad. He really hated Chael. But there's a lot of guys that are shit talkers, and then you talk to Chael, and he's an awesome guy. Like, he's a really nice, genuinely good guy.
Yeah.
He's a really smart dude and really likable person. But with him, there was a different, I just thought it was more organic for him to be a shit talker. And again, I don't know Colby, so maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah.
But he's fighting Kamaru Usman, so we'll see.
Yeah.
That's going to be a very good fight. But you can't underestimate Colby just because he says dickish things. He's a very good fighter.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, to me, the thing is if you're making, like, shit talking does absolutely work. I mean, that's the thing, is you can't get into someone's head. There's no way Jose Aldo would have been knocked out normally in
13
the first
seconds.
punch.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Because and that's when I started to appreciate what Conor did. When I started to hate Conor was, and I won't hate him if he wants to come on our wonderful show, but what I started was when he threw the thing through the bus, because at that point it's almost like the family thing. And Rose Namajunas, who I adore, said that she was, and all that stuff, because I was like, it's not about you now, it's about other fighters as well. And that got to the line of disrespectful to me. And I just always feel like that's the one thing, if it's a game and whatever, but when it starts getting really disrespectful and terrorizing other fighters, what he did with Jose, I thought, looking back, was brilliant. It's the kind of Muhammad Ali thing with George, with Frazier, right?
Frazier and Sonny Liston, and everyone he fought, he did it to.
Yeah.
And Foreman.
So some people are really good at it, but
Yeah, well, there's kind of this dichotomy, man, where, like, it is a sport, like how I view it, but then they like knock each other out, like we're trying to knock each other unconscious. So you have to play both ends, man, where you can't just see it as it's like just this beautiful artwork with, like, the motions look nice and the techniques are nice. There's also this, like, really ugly, brutal side, and if you can in any way disrupt the other person's ability to do what they're doing through shit talking, then that's like the art of war, right? Like, I think who wrote that book? Lao Tzu? No,
Sun Tzu or some Tzu. His name I don't remember, but I would know it if I heard it.
Yeah. He says in there, any way that you can create stress in your opponent's head is the better way to go into a situation. So if he was going to sword fight someone, I remember reading in that book that he would just purposely show up 15 minutes late to whatever sword fight he was going to do, just to create a little bit more stress in their head. So it is the art of war too.
That's an art. That's a talent as well.
Yeah, it's not just a sport. Like, it's also like this primitive type of, like, I'm trying to hurt you and you're trying to hurt me, and if I can do this to make my advantages a little bit better, then I'm going to do that.
Well, you look at Conor too. There's certain guys, like when he fights Nate is unflappable.
Yeah.
Like, you can't intimidate Nate Diaz. He's just not.
Yeah.
I mean, he'll get mad at you and tell you to go fuck yourself. He'll throw a beer bottle at you, but he's not going to be broken by that because he's just immune to it.
And Nate, and we'll end on this because you've been so gracious with your time. Nate is ironically the guy who's helped me the most with my career without even knowing it, because talk about vulnerability, he's the biggest shit talker, and he was the one, and he once said in an interview, and I was like, Nate Diaz has actually helped my life. And what he said is, someone asked him, do you ever fear getting knocked out? And his answer was, every time I go into a fight, I expect to get knocked out. He said, there's other people that are hitting me with their fists, and I expect to be knocked out. He said, and I know what's going to happen. My friends and family are going to feel bad. People are going to, whatever. He's like, that's the worst that can happen. And I know it's probably going to happen, but also I have a chance of knocking that guy out. And he's like, so I go in there going like, so I'll just try to knock that guy out too. And I just thought that freedom of going like, it's almost going like, I'm going in knowing that I'm fighting guys that are, I'm not saying that they don't have a chance.
Sure.
And I thought that was really respectful. And that's why I like him so much, because he's not just a shit talker. He's obviously very intellectual to think like that.
And he's tough.
and that helped me with saying the worst that could happen is I just bomb in front of an audience with a new joke. And it's really not that, I mean, it's a lot worse getting knocked out because your brainstem gets off you. But I just go back to my house and feel terrible about myself until the next good show.
Well, you walk through the worst case, like when you walk through it and you think it through. Okay, this. Oh yeah, it's not that bad.
Yeah.
Get knocked out's much scarier than bombing on a stage. You know what I mean? So like the fact that these guys are going in there and risking being knocked, because Matt Serra always calls it the hurt game. He's like, it's hard for him to like prepare for a guy like when Aljo and Frankie Edgar had maybe mentioned fighting Aljo. Like Matt's like, fuck, because he loves Frankie Edgar, but Aljo's his guy, and it's like, Jesus. I mean, like, you would hate to have to, because they used to try to train him to hurt somebody he likes, you know?
Yeah.
Matt takes it very personally, so he must be really bummed out about Chris. Just to frame this, Chris lost last night to Dominic Reyes. So I want to text Matt, because I'm sure he's really bummed.
Yeah, I'm sure he is.
Yeah, watching guys you like, and I like Chris so much, watching a guy you like, that's the one thing I don't like about having interviewed so many fighters. It's hard to root for or against anybody, because I interview them and I like all of them. Like, I've interviewed DC, I've interviewed Stipe, and I know them, and it's like, who do I root for? I like them.
I've been watching UFC for 3 or 4 years, and my wife said to me recently, like, isn't that pretty cool? You're friends with the number 3 bantamweight. And I was like, some I'm not enjoying it. And she's like, why? And I go, because I'm so worried about him now. I go, like, in practice, he hurt his neck, and I'm like, that's my friend. I don't want him, like, and the last fight you had, it wasn't enjoyable for me, because me and you had become kind of friendly at that point. We're going out for coffee and talked, and I really like him as a guy. And the whole time I was like, I can't look, just tell me, is he winning? And my wife was going, he's doing good, he's doing good. And then there was one point where Sun Tzu had you, I think, in a choke, and it looked like there was a chance maybe you could get choked out. I don't know if you ever felt that, but I remember feeling like my heart go into my stomach, and I was like, I don't like knowing the fighters now.
Yeah, it's weird, because when I'm watching 2 of my buddies fight, which I have to do often, I do care if they win or lose, but I just don't want them to get hurt. Like, that's number one thing on my head when I'm watching 2 teammates that I really love watch fight. It's just, all right, like, just don't get fucking knocked out so that you have to take a bunch of time off, or that you have to actually be done doing the sport, because there's been a number of times where like people have had to call it quits because they'll come into the gym with like a stutter, and then like it just won't go away, and then like all of that brain damage, and then it's just hard watching that, and then having to watch your buddies go and like risk also that. It's tough.
Yeah, they thought Max Holloway had something at one point, right? I think Bisping noticed something while he was interviewing once, but Max they thought had something, but apparently he's fine now.
Yeah.
How many? Do you have one loss?
One loss.
What you ought to do? Go watch the one loss. Watch that and get it out of the way. Like, okay, this is what it looks like to watch my friend lose. And then the next time you're like, okay, I got through that. It's unpleasant. It sucks watching your friend.
Yeah, sure.
I've watched Matt lose to GSP, and I'm like, oh, fuck, I love Matt. But when you watch that, it's like, okay, then it makes it slightly more.
And I've always thought to myself, and I got to let you go because you've been so gracious, but I've always thought to myself, I've always looked at it as a comedian, what do I want people to say to me when I bomb? And what I want them to do is to not say anything or joke about it. Like, you've probably done it to me. I think you have. Like, I've come off stage and you've been like, you'll get him next time, buddy. And I'm like, God, I love you for doing that, because we all know that the people who outside the business who are like, I had a girlfriend once go, my mom thinks you're funny, because I bombed really bad. And she's like, you're good. My mom thinks you're funny. And I'm going like, that's the worst thing anyone could have ever said to me.
The worst.
I just want them to joke around a bit, or do what you would do, go like, hey, boy, don't quit your day job. I'd rather have that.
I love to make eye contact at the cellar with someone when they're bombing on stage, just from the door. It's such a relief when your friend sees you bombing.
It makes it so much better.
But I was with Bob Kelly before we go. I was with Bob Kelly in Vegas. We saw Brock fight Frank Mir. It was the second fight when Brock beat him very, very badly. And afterwards, we saw Frank coming backstage, and Bobby and I were standing with Reed Harris. What do you say? And I didn't know what to say. and he walked by, and Bobby goes, "Good job, Frank." Like, he didn't know what to say.
Yeah.
He wasn't trying to be a dick.
Yeah.
But he was like, good job, Frank, or good fight. I was
Yeah.
like, oh, shut up, Bob. But he just didn't know what to say because he loved Frank Mir. And to see a heavyweight lose, like a guy this big walking down after being beaten badly, you're like, fuck. Brock comes through and you know what to say. Congratulations, great job.
Yeah.
But when a guy loses, what do you say? It's really hard.
Yeah. What do I say to you? Well, you're not going to lose then, Cory, right?
But if you lose, what does somebody say to you that's okay?
Just pretend that it didn't happen.
Yeah. Hey, man, how you doing? Yeah.
Just be like, I didn't see what happened. I'll go watch. All right.
Yeah.
On that subject. All right. Well, God, you were so awesome.
Thanks, man. I enjoyed it.
Yeah,
Thank
thanks
you
a lot,
so much
Jim.
for doing
Thank
that.
you.
You made me look really cool in front of my UFC bantamweight.
No, I'm happy to do
number
it.
3 guy. So there's Jim Norton. You got everything going for you in the world. So is there anything I can plug for you? Anything
If they
we
want
can
to
say?
see me, Twitter or the website, jimnorton.com or Jim Norton on Twitter, and come see my show.
Awesome. And by the way, your show is more, and you're more honest than ever, and just more incredible than
Thank
ever.
you.
And I just from the bottom of my heart, I'm a fan of yours, and I
Oh,
appreciate
thanks,
you doing
Mitch.
it. So
I'm happy to see you.
absolutely.
Podcast.